Welcome to block 12. This is an unusual block that we did way back in 2013. It's a variation of Mrs. Roosevelt's favorite. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew your A 3 3/8 inch wide strip to your B 5 3/4 15 inch strip. Now 15 is an arbitrary number. You only need 13 inches. So sometimes when you get your cut, they might not be exactly the same size. That's okay. We only need 13 inches and I'm giving you plenty of fabric to cut. So one of the first things you want to do is to square up your one edge, make it a nice straight edge. And then I'm going to flip that around so I can cut it consecutively. And this says, the direction says to cut this strip into 4 3 1/4. So 3 1/4 inch. When you cut strips, it's always good to line up one of the lines. Ooh, I'm sorry about that glare. One of the lines on your ruler on this seam line. Don't worry about this part or this part. Line it up on your seam line. So I'm going to line that 3 1/4 and cut. And you need 4 of those pieces. You'll have a couple of inches left over. You have plenty of fabric. On step 2 it says to make your half square triangles. We're going to make them just like we have all the way through every block that we've had them in so far this year. And you're going to draw your lines. You're going to stitch onto 2 outside lines. Let's see, make sure you can see my lines. Stitch on the 2 outside lines and then cut apart. And when you cut them apart, they're going to look like this with the tails hanging off. I have oversized them just a little bit, so you might have to trim them down. And these particular squares are trimmed down to 2 1/2. So with my block lock ruler, I'm going to trim them. And then I'll cut those other ears off. Now the directions on these are kind of different on the pressing in that half of them you're going to press towards your light color and half of them you're going to press towards your dark color. So you're going to press them 2 different ways. Then you're going to sew them together, and when you press them 2 different ways, what happens when you join these to make your flying geese unit like this, this one's pressed down, this one's pressed up, so they butt into each other very nicely. And it makes a perfect peak, so that after you sew them, you have the perfect peak. And after you sew them, then you're going to press this unit open. I like to press this unit open because I can see exactly where my seam is, where these 2 pieces meet. I can hit that perfectly and have a perfect point on my flying geese. Now after you construct this unit, it should measure 2 1/2 by 4 1/2. Then you're going to take your last 4 A 3 inch squares and you're going to cut them one time on one diagonal so that you have half square triangles. With these half square triangles, you're going to sew them to each side of the unit, the flying geese unit that you just made. Make sure you orient them correctly. Once they're sewn, it's going to look something like this. And you're going to notice these funny little things hanging off. I don't like those funny little things hanging off, so I like to trim them. So I'm going to just take my ruler and trim those little ears off. And it asks you to take your larger D triangle, and you're going to put it to the top of that unit. So like we did before, you're going to find the center of that by pressing that. I'm just going to finger press it, but you can take it to the iron. And that little crease is where the center of that is, and that's going to line up with this seam. So you're going to put that crease there, right on that seam. And you're going to notice the little parts of it that hang off. That's how it's supposed to do. And you're going to pin it. And then when you stitch, flip it over so that you can hit this part of it just perfect. You're going to make 4 of these. These are your 4 side triangles. This block is constructed a little differently than an average block that we make, in that it's constructed diagonally. Now that you've sewn the larger D triangle to the top of your unit, you want to trim off the little dog ears that are hanging. You want to press it towards this upper triangle. These are the 4 side pieces in the block. Now you're going to join these to one of these rectangles that you cut earlier. So they're going to be like this. And yes, this is going to hang off. So you want these intersections to meet just perfect. So to do that, you're going to be stick pinning again. So you're going to take your pin, and right where these 2 stitching lines intersect, you're going to put your pin in there, just like that. And you want it to be a 1/4 inch. You want to be right in the seam of this 1/4 inch down on this rectangle. And when you put these together in a perfect world, these are going to line up at the top just right. And you're going to notice that this triangle doesn't sew all the way down. That's how it's supposed to be. Now, when you stick pin, you want that pin to come out perpendicular. You want it to come out straight out. You don't want it to slant down or slant up. You want it to come straight out. And then you're going to put a pin on each side of that one so that the intersections are just perfect when you go to the sewing machine and sew it. So it's going to look something like that, and then you can take this pin out. And these line up, the square end's going to line up here at the top. It's going to line up perfectly. And then you're going to stitch right a thread off of that intersection where those 2 lines meet, and then you'll just sew off the end. So that sounds kind of confusing, but what it looks like after you get 2 of them sewn on each side of it, it looks like this. And what I'm talking about stick pinning are these intersections right here. You want those triangles just to touch the top of this rectangle that you have here. And you're going to make 2 of these. Then you're going to make the 3rd row. It's going to be the last 2 of these 3 1/4 inch rectangles that we cut, and your center block, and you're going to make 1 long strip. So here are the 3 components that you're going to put together. Now there are certain parts that you need to match up. You need to match this intersection to the center square, these 2, and up here too. And then you're going to stick pin again where this triangle joins this rectangle. And there's 4 of those. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And you're going to match all those so you get these perfect intersections like we did when we sewed them before. And yes, we're not done yet. Keep going. Now here's the fun part of this whole block. I have all the pieces put together. We have these corners that are hanging off, but we're going to take a 12.5 inch square and put it on top of our block and make it a perfect block. So we want to make sure that these corners come out square. So you just have to fuss with it a little. It's a hair oversized, so you want to make sure your corners come out where the corners are supposed to be. And you close your eyes, you take a deep breath, and you start cutting. There is one of my corners, two of my corners. I'm going to turn a little so I can get in there a little bit more accurate and trim up the other side. And turn it one more time so I can get this other side nice and square. And this should be a perfect 12.5-inch block when you get done. And there it is. Block 12 completed.